have a question for the guys here at the beginning. Guys, have any of you ever asked a woman when she was due and she wasn't? I think on average, the average guy does this exactly one time. Unfortunately, I am above average. And I always think, me and my big mouth, right? Which, of course, is the title of this series. And if you weren't with us last week, we're going to catch you up really fast. If you were with us last week, this is going to be a very quick recap. The title of the series is on the screen. I'm going to ask you all to say it with me. Let's all say it together. Me and my big mouth. And remember, this isn't your wife's big mouth. This isn't your husband's big mouth. This isn't your mom's big mouth or your sister's big mouth or your son's big mouth. This is me. This is you. Me and my big mouth. So one more time, again, with the emphasis on me and my. Let's say it together. Me and my big mouth. Now, that's the big idea for the whole series. And last week, we took 6 words that James wrote to us in his section of the Bible, and we made a big deal out of those. And those same 6 words are going to be the big deal again for this weekend. They were quick to listen and slow to speak. Quick to listen and slow to speak. We did this thing with our hands, and I'm going to ask you all to do it with me just one more time. Let's all put our hands out in front of us. You kind of close them up to start, but then you say, let's do it together. Quick to listen, slow to speak. And the whole idea here is that when you're closed up, when your fists are clenched, your ears are closed, your mind is closed, your heart is closed, your self is closed, that's a very difficult way to get through a conversation, especially through a conflict. And the truth is, we all want the same thing when we're talking to each other or even arguing with each other. We want someone else to hear us or understand us, to take the time just to listen so that they could understand where we're coming from. That's what we want from them, and it's the exact same thing that they want from us. So if we could be quick to listen and slow to speak, that could be powerful. Now, in some ways, the message today is going to be the exact same message from some different angles, and I think with a little different intensity. But this is such a big thing that I want you to capture it 2 weeks in a row. I think it was such a big thing to James that he wrote about it in James chapter 1 that we looked at last week, and then he wrote about it again in James chapter 3 that we're going to look at this week. Now, remember, James is a follower of Jesus, but more than that, he's literally the brother of Jesus. He was not a follower of Jesus before his brother died and rose again, but once he saw Jesus' resurrection, that changed everything. He became a follower of Jesus, and then he would write to people who were followers of Jesus. Now, the advice in James' book is so practical that you don't even have to be a follower of Jesus for it to benefit your life. You'll see the wisdom in this passage of Scripture tonight. And I'm glad for that, because I know some of you are not followers of Jesus, and I want it to help your life. And then there will be a little section at the end that is very particular for those of us who are followers of Jesus. And maybe one more thing about James before I start reading is this. If you've never really been a person who's read the Bible, or maybe it intimidates you a little bit, you think, I'm not sure I could interpret that. If you wanted to just take a shot at it, you should just start with this section that James wrote. It's the simplest, most practical, most applicable part to our lives. I'd really encourage you to do that. So in James chapter 3, verse 2, this is what he says. He says, we all stumble in many ways. That's, of course, for sure true. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect. Anyone who's never at fault in what they say is perfect. And then he explains what that means. He says they're able to keep their whole body in check. If you could keep your tongue in check, if you could keep what you say, if you could keep your words in check all the time, you would be perfect because you'd keep your whole body, you'd keep your whole life in check if you could keep your tongue in check. And so you know I do this sometimes. This is like all play. I'm going to need some of you to kind of show of hands here, okay? So here's the definition. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say, who's never at fault in what they say. Show of hands if that's you. Put them up high. All right, I want everyone to look around and see how many hands are up right now, right? Nobody has their hands up. But this is fascinating, of course, because James knew one person who was like this. It was his brother. And then he decided nobody else is like this. And the idea that none of us can put our hands up, that none of us are perfect about this teaches us something. And the first thing I think it teaches us is that our words are volatile. They're out of control. You do not have complete control over your words. We're learning together through this series that it's good to have a pause button before we speak, quick to listen and slow to speak. But a lot of us wish we had a rewind button where we could take those things that we said and erase them, go back before we said them and have it play again. But there is no rewind button with our words. And what he's saying, this is very important to all of us. He says, you will not be able to solve the problem of your mouth once and for all. It's unsolvable. It is a tension to be managed, not a problem to be solved. Now, a pastor I really respect, his name's Andy Stanley, came up with this principle. I think he's the one who came up with it. It's meant a lot to me in all kinds of leadership. He said, if you can look in your life and you say, there's some things that are solvable, those are problems, you should solve those. And there's some things that are tensions. They're not actually solvable. There's just tensions in life, and you have to manage tensions. And the biggest problems for a lot of us in life and leadership is that we actually, when we have a problem that should be solved, we just manage it. And when we have a tension that has to be managed, we try to solve it. But if you can figure out what's a problem to solve, you can solve those. Some things are just tensions to manage, and that's your words. It's volatile. You're going to blow up sometime. You are going to get this wrong. The very best you can hope for is to mitigate the effect of your words, because you will not be perfect. Not only are words volatile, words are, of course, powerful. Words have a tremendous weight on people's lives when they come out of our mouths. Words have shaped the whole trajectories of people's lives. Please think about this with me. Some of you, as a child, had confidence, and then you heard someone say something, or maybe you overheard someone say something, and it crushed your confidence. And it may still have an effect on your life decades later. And some of you, as children, had no confidence, but then someone spoke words over you, or they spoke words to you, and they gave life to you, and they helped you see yourself in a way you could not see yourself before. And the words that came out of someone's mouth literally gave you the confidence that set a new trajectory for your life. And what we know is that words are not equally weighted. Negative and positive words are not equally weighted. Next week is all about positive words in our lives. And I was thinking about this. I keep a file in my office. I actually just reached into it just before I came out here tonight. And I grabbed this. This is a stack of about 100 note cards that some of you and many others wrote to me on my 20th anniversary at Suncrest years ago. And I keep them. Because almost all of you said nice things. Actually, I think all of you did. There's about 100 cards here, but here's what I know. One really, really scathing email, I can read 100 cards. It doesn't quite equal it out. Because negative words weigh more than positive words. The people who are speaking the words are not all equally weighted. I'm a boss. I'm a pastor. My words weigh more. And if you're in a position of authority, you should understand this, that your words weigh more. Some people's words weigh 50 pounds. Your words probably weigh 200 pounds. So you should choose them carefully. You should give encouragement freely, and you should give critique carefully, because your words weigh more. But boss's words don't compare anything to mother's words. If you're a mom, your words weigh 500 pounds. The words that you speak into and over your children, the words that you speak about them that they overhear or learn about later, for good or for bad, they weigh a lot. And dads, I don't know why this is. Sometimes I wish it wasn't this way. I think our words weigh the most of all. I have a friend who was talking to Another friend of his was a lady who was in her 20s, had been through a tough spot in life, and then got her life back on track and was doing great. And he was speaking to her, and he was a pastor. He was her pastor, and he said to her, "Hey, I just want to tell you, I think you're doing great. I'm so proud of how you've gotten on the straight and narrow. You got some things cleaned up. You're doing great as a single mom. You're doing awesome." And you know what she said to him? She said, "I wish my dad would tell me that." I mean, thank you. Thanks for saying that, Pastor. But your words don't mean what my dad's words mean to me. If my dad would say that, then it would matter. Because not all words are weighted equally. And after you say some weighted words, your apology afterwards doesn't equal out to what you said before the apology. It just doesn't. I mean, people do this, right? They'll say something mean or horrible or careless or sarcastic, and then they'll come back later and they'll say, "I'm sorry," and they want it to be all fine, just fine, right? And they'll even say sometimes, "Well, I said I'm sorry." Well, I said I'm sorry, as if saying you're sorry is going to redeem the weight of the critic. It never does. Words are powerful. Maya Angelou passed away a few years ago, just a woman with a tremendous way with words herself. This is what she said about words. She said, "Words are things. You must be careful. Careful about calling people out of their names, using racial pejoratives and sexual pejoratives and all that ignorance. Don't do that. Someday we'll be able to measure the power of words." I think they're things. They get on walls, they get in your wallpaper, they get in your rugs, in your upholstery, in your clothes, and finally they get into you. Words are powerful things, so it would be wise to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Now, what James does over most of the rest of the passage is he just decides to give us a lot of images to help us to understand the weight of our words and their influence that is disproportional to what it seems like it should be. So let me give you a few images that he gives us. He says, when we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. He says, have you ever noticed that? I don't know if any of you have ridden horses or like horses. I'm not a big horse person, but for some reason my daughter just loves horses. And it feels like whenever we go on vacation, at least one part of our vacation is going to be to find a trail ride somewhere so she can ride a horse. She just loves this stuff. I took her with a trip to Myanmar this past year to do a mission trip. She was awesome, leading these kids from other countries in a little vacation Bible school. In Myanmar, while we were on the beach, they had horses. And I'm like, here we go. She's going to ride a horse, right? Like, it's just wild. But I remember when she was really little, like some of you have daughters who have done this, really little, she was on a horse, and like so little that like her legs weren't like this, they were just like this. And I would always think like, she's on like an elephant horse. Like she's little and it's big, but here's the thing. The horse was under control. Why? Because it had a bit in its mouth. You know what a bit looks like? This is just a simple picture. With that small bit, you can control the whole horse. Small size, enormous influence, disproportional influence. James goes on, he gives us another image. He says, or take ships as an example. Although they are so large, and in James' day, think first century, right? They didn't have skyscrapers, they didn't have things like that. Ships were among the largest things that people would have ever seen in the first century. Even though they're so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder. He said, this is amazing. Wherever the pilot wants it to go. This is a picture of a first century ship. You see that little rudder on the back? It's got a handle. That rudder has all the power. That ship's loaded with tons of cargo, hundreds of people. There's one person working the rudder who controls the whole thing. Small piece, enormous influence. Small piece shapes the whole direction of the ship. That's ships. James goes on. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. You'll be glad to know I'm not going to put a picture of a tongue on the screen. Aren't tongues probably one of the most disgusting parts of a body? But think about it, it's this really small part. Did you know the tongue has 8 muscles in it? Your body as a whole has over 800 muscles in it. Interestingly, this is a fact. The 8 muscles on everyone's tongue, they're the only muscles in the body that never get tired. They never wear out. Surprise, surprise, right? And here's the thing. This small part of the body has this undue influence. Your tongue. It'll shape your marriage. It will shape it for good or shape it for bad. Your tongue. It will shape your friendships, and it will shape them for good or for bad. This is kind of a weird thing. Like, it's only your mouth. It's only the words coming out of your mouth. But the whole direction of your life, your tongue, may very well shape whether you keep your job or lose your job. And it's just your words. It's just a small part of your being. But it essentially embodies your whole life. It's wild. So powerful. Gives us one more image. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. Now, I'm amazed James came up with this in the first century because, I can't imagine they would have seen that many forest fires the way that we get to see them today. When you think about it, think about this. I got it right here. Small spark. This does that. This little thing right here. That's all it takes. And James says, that's what your tongue is like. This small thing with a disproportional influence in your life. And you would be wise to be quick to listen and slow to speak because of the power of your words and how volatile it is. Now, so far it's been kind of it could be good, it could be bad, but James is going to go on a little riff here, and this is where we need to go today, just to think about the potential negative influence of our tongues. He says, the tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. Here's what he's saying. There's no other part of your body that can get you in as much trouble as your tongue can get you in. There's other parts of the body that are bigger. There's other parts of the body that are stronger. No other part of your body shapes the direction, the trajectory, the quality of your life more than the words that come out of your mouth. It's your tongue. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. And by hell, he's not talking about the eternal existence that you'll go to after you die. He's talking about the source of evil. It is where it comes from. There is something inside all of us. This is why we're volatile. Because all of us has a nature inside of us that is not perfect and will go wrong at times. And here's the thing. In marriages, words, careless words, harmful words, scorch a whole family. They're scorched. Entire wars have been started with words, with careless words, with harmful words. And whole countries have been scorched like a forest fire because of words. Children. They hear a teacher's words, or a coach's words, or a parent's words. And whole identities have been scorched by the power of words. And we should embrace it, because you might be sitting there right now thinking, yeah, I've been on the receiving end of that. But remember, it's me and my big mouth and you and your big mouth. So we should think about being on the giving end of that. The truth is that us, me, you, we have scorched people with our words. And then you know what happens after we scorch people with our words? Usually we get defensive. And usually we try to use more words to defend ourselves. And we'll say something like, well, I didn't mean it. Don't take it seriously. Why are you all worked up about that? We'll say things like, well, I was tired, or I was hungry, or I was drunk. And somehow we think that the careless use of our words means they shouldn't count against us. If you were responsible for carelessly starting a forest fire, who would be responsible for that? You would. And this is such a big part of our life. See, think about it like this with me. Our relationships define our lives. Some of you hear me say this all the time. I'm just admitting it, I'm on a lifelong campaign to try to help people agree with my theory, what I think is the Scripture's theory about life. Here's the theory. You are a relational being. God is a relational being. He wants to relate to you. He wants you to relate to him. He wants us to relate to one another. And here's the result of it. This is how I know. Because people whose relationships are good, life is good. It genuinely doesn't matter if you're poor or if you're rich. It doesn't matter if you have a great job or a lousy job. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or if you're young or if you're old. When your relationships are good, life is good. And when your relationships are bad, life is bad. The relationships define your life. Now, if you'll go with me on that theory, let me take you to the next level of the theory. Here's the next level. Words define our relationships. And if we want our relationships to thrive so life is good, then here's the thing. When your words are good, your relationships are good. When you're being slow to speak and quick to listen, when you're offering encouragement, pointing out what's good or wholesome, relationships are good. And when you take the posture of a critic or slip into sarcasm or decide you're going to win the argument with a scorched earth approach, words are bad and relationships are bad. And if this is true, and I think it is, then what this means is, as your words go, so goes your life. As your words go, so goes your life. He's going to give us another image. He says, all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. He says, this is pretty wild. Maybe it wasn't always the case, but here we are in the 1st century, and we've figured out how to live life without having to be afraid of those animals, right? We've figured it out, right? Lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, nope, don't have to worry about that. You can figure it out. There's no reason for you to get attacked by a shark. None of you have to get attacked by a shark. At your own risk, you go into the shark's habitat. Hey, that's on you. That's on you. But we've figured it out. That's what James is saying. We've figured out how to construct our lives so that we've been able to kind of tame the whole animal kingdom. It will not get us. But no human being can tame the tongue. It will not be domesticated. It will not be tamed. It is untamable. You will not be perfect at this. The best you can hope for is to mitigate it, and the best way to mitigate it is to be quick to listen and slow to speak. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. You know what he's saying here? He's saying your tongue, my tongue, your words and my words, they should come with a warning label. We should get placards. That's what we should do. I mean, it's good to see a placard say, oh, okay, that's flammable, that's dangerous, that's poison. We should get placards for our mouths because our mouths are untamable and they are full of deadly poison. And just think about this with me for a moment. I've been a pastor for 23 plus years at this stage here at Suncrest. It's been a pretty good run. I hope the run continues for a number of more years and decades. But here's the thing. In just the next 5 minutes, since I have this little microphone attached to my mouth and you all are sitting here, I could say things that would just end my ministry. I could. I could choose to say, like, just some words could come out of my mouth. And if the elders didn't come up in the middle of my sermon, they would definitely be here next week. And they would be on the platform, and they'd probably say something like, so y'all remember Greg? If you were here last week, you know he said some things that mean he can't be on this platform anymore. He said he was sorry, but that doesn't matter. What he said was so bad that he can't be here anymore, and it's done. And they'd be right. That's how poisonous our words can be. And so we should measure our words, to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Now, James is going to give us one more image, and this image is particularly for believers. If you're not a believer, you can totally check out at this stage. This part is not for you. This is just for those of us who are followers of Jesus. Okay, this is what he says. He says, with the tongue, we praise our Lord and Father, and with it, we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. And what did James just do there? I'll tell you what he did here. He just told you about your day today. That's all he did. He said, you know, within the last hour here, you were singing, you were praising God, you were saying how good God is. That part was awesome. But earlier today, and probably later today, you're going to talk about people. These are people that God created. They're people who made in God's image. And while you're praising God, you're cursing God's most precious creation. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. He's saying, lift up your eyes a little bit. Every person who's in your life, every person on planet Earth, they are all creations of God, made in the image of God. When you speak about them or over them or to them, speak about them, over them, and to them with the understanding that you're speaking about someone God created in His likeness. If you believe in this Jesus thing, and Jesus was willing to die for this, then isn't the least we can do if we're going to praise God is not to. Just let it go with our words. So what do you do? I want to give you a couple of things to think about. I think we want to acknowledge that we're managing our words. There's a tension in our words. You will constantly be prone to say things that are out of bounds. But to manage your words, do two things. The first is this: you have to confess. You have to confess. Now, saying I'm sorry right after you said something horrible doesn't equal it out. But being able to go to someone and say, I was wrong. I should not have said it that way. I should not have used those words. I was tired, but that is not an excuse. It's not an excuse. It's my responsibility to speak to you like you're a being that God created. And it was not okay. Dads, remember our words, how much they weigh? Our apologies have the potential to weigh a lot also. Everyone in this room is a son or a daughter of someone. Doesn't matter how old you are. Some of you, sadly, have lost both your parents. You don't have this chance to speak to them. But for all the rest of us who have the chance to speak to your parents, no matter what your age, you know this, right? The weight of your words to your parents, those words don't bounce. Those words land. They land. And you might think, oh, it's just my mom. Oh, it's just my dad. It's not. Those words land. Ladies, wives, I know your husband, your boyfriend, tries to put on a persona that acts like he's tough, that acts like he has it all together, that acts like things don't bother him. Let me just speak to you as a person who is a husband. Wives, you hold your husband's ego and to some degree his identity in your hands. And he would probably never admit it. But the weight of your words to him shape everything. Men, we could have a conversation about how we speak about the women in our lives. We could have a conversation about how we speak about and to the women in our workplaces. But we could just have a conversation about how we speak about and to women who even aren't around. And the words that you and I use about women, nothing out of bounds. Just honor women. Honor them when they're present, and honor them when they're not present, and honor them when you're with a group of guys, and when a group of guys goes out of bounds, be the one who speaks up about it and say, that's not right. It's not right. And if you have trouble with that, just imagine it's your daughter, that it's your niece, that it's your mom, that it's your wife. It's not right. Some of you, when you were a child or a teenager, you were on the receiving end of very hurtful words. And it shaped you, and I'm sad about it. I wish it didn't, and you're working through that. And you're probably aware of this, but as much as that hurt you, one of the things that children do is we just go on with whatever was modeled to us. And if you happen to be someone who was scorched by the words of your parents, my plea to you is to stop it at your generation. Don't let it go on to the next generation. Don't pass that on. There's no room for sarcasm in families. About your wife or about your husband or about your children. I know when you say it, people laugh. But not everybody's laughing. Confessing means that we own what we have said and what we will say. And we're quick to listen, slow to speak. The other piece of this is simply surrender. If you want to mitigate or manage the tension of your words, we acknowledge that words become weapons. And these are weapons that we're ready to lay down. We just surrender. It's a white flag. Not interested in winning that war. Not interested in winning that fight. Not interested in winning that battle. I surrender. Since there's not a rewind button, I need the pause button to be quick to listen, slow to speak. I don't think you can do this on your own. And you will fail. And so if there's one thing, if you went through this past week with someone in mind to be quick to listen and slow to speak, and then you noticed you failed, let me give you something new this week. It's just a prayer. It's to say, I tried it on my own last week. It didn't work when I tried it on my own. So, Father, I need you. Lord, I need to have a strength that I don't have. I need to catch myself when I am not catching myself. I need to see the power where my words land. Lord, I need you to show me that. And so I want to ask you to pray prayers of confession and surrender with our words this week. Let me pray that right now. God, we need you. I know all too well, God, that things slip out, things slide out. Sometimes I shove things out that cause pain and heartache and erode the relationships that matter most to me. And so I need you. We need you. In Jesus' name.